What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and are you ready to set some intentions for this week? We got a jam-packed week. All of the traditional planets, even though I'm not talking about the moon here, even the moon, I'm sure she's talking to somebody, is having a conversation during this week. We have a lot of energy. The Sun and Mercury are forming their inferior conjunction. Mars is going to be stationing retrograde. Venus is entering to Aquarius. We're feeling a lot. We're thinking a lot. But, I like how this story is kind of weaving in. Before we get into this whole thing, if you're new here again, my name is Justin, and one of the things I do is talk about the celestial news weekly, the chit chat that's going on in the sky, and let's get into it. Let's get chatting because I got a lot to talk about here. But on Jupiter Day, the 5th of December, at about 6:18 p.m., and that's going to be Pacific time, the Sun is going to be forming, and Mercury is going to be forming a conjunction with one another. This is going to be happening at 14 degrees and 27 minutes of Sagittarius. Now, this is one of the times, this happens about 3, sometimes 4 times a year, where the Sun and Mercury do this dance with one another. Mercury, once Mercury goes direct, goes ahead of the Sun, is darting ahead, shoots off. But the thing, Mercury can only be about 28 degrees away from the Sun before they pull back again, and then comes back to the heart of the Sun, and then goes back and then does like this inferior conjunction when both, and Venus does this too, but where they have these, and they all technically do it, but where they have this time where we're in retrograde, and we're really kind of, I think with Mercury times, see one where this is falling in your chart, and Mercury retrogrades don't have to be this like disastrous time where things are mayhem. I'd say for the most part, I don't know about for you, but I'd say this Mercury retrograde so far has been moving along fairly well. There could be more, little more energy, I think, behind some things, but that's just what my own personal observation of it. I would love to hear what's been your your adventure through this retrograde. But really, it's a time to, I like to think of, look at wherever this area of this chart is happening, and how can you better show up in this part of your chart. What are some ways that you can bring in those Mercury influences to make this chart, or make that portion of your chart, come alive more? So let's say, for example, this is happening for me. My rising sign is in Leo, so this is happening in my 5th house, and so I could be thinking about, or what I would even tell some Leos to be thinking about, our little Leo risings, would be, how is your relationship with your creative endeavors? Whether that be an actual project, maybe you have a child that you're thinking about, maybe the conversation there is kind of weird. Or maybe, what are some things like those kind of things that could help those kind of 5th house pleasures, desires. Maybe there's some ways you can bring more energy into your conversation. Maybe you've been in a bit of a downer type of mood in this Sag, and I'm looking again, speaking of Sag energy, I got the 10 of Wands here today for my general energy, so it's just like, but I think with this Mercury and Sun kind of retrograde here, especially within a fire sign, the mutable fire sign of Sagittarius, so this is where Mercury finds their detriment. And that just means that Mercury, it still functions and can be very inspired in Sagittarius. But I think that's all it can be. It's just a lot of inspiration, just a lot of heat and just everywhere. But nothing, it's not doing anything. It's just going about just being inspired. And that's great, but if we don't see any of those things, then it doesn't mean anything. This is a time where we want to see that stuff manifest. So be thinking about how you can make this area of your chart, manifest a bit more, make that a bit more, feel like it's just like a little more in control, and things along those lines. What are maybe some affirmations that you can speak into this portion of your chart, kind of working with Mercury that way? Maybe there's some things that you want to learn, that you want to get into, some conversations that you want to have, maybe with a mentor, something along those lines. So just pay attention to. But really, though, I would say that this would be, if you've had any sort of inspirations that have come up that you wanted to set any intentions, let's say during this lunar cycle, with the Sun and Moon had just done their new moon dance. So this can be a great time too if you've been meaning to start something else but time's gotten away from you. This could be a great time to get it back. Get it back and get things growing and get things prospering, which I think will help you keep you motivated, because on the next day, let's get into Venus Day, because this is a busy one, the 6th of December. First little thing here, at about 3:33 p.m. and again that's Pacific time, Mars is going to be stationing retrograde in the sign of Leo. And where does that retrograde happen? 6 degrees and 10 minutes of Leo. That's where this retrograde is happening. So if you have any planets or points around that, this, because that's a time where the planet will stay quite a bit at the sign, or at the degree where it stations and the degree that it goes direct in. So you want to pay attention to if you have any points or planets around those times that could be activating something more personally in you. I actually have this. This is actually about a degree away from my Mercury sign while we're talking about Mercury. But similar thing with the Mercury retrograde. Mars retrograde, one thing I would invite is to, because it's going between Cancer and Leo. So you want to see where you have Cancer and Leo in your chart, where this retrograde is happening. But the retrogrades, I'd like to say, are like an evaluation, or like a reevaluation phase. How have you been taking your actions? Have you been very aggressive in how you've been acting recently with this Mars energy, or have you been very passive and maybe you're needing a bit more energy during this time? Maybe there's a project that's needing to pull through. This Mars energy doesn't just have to be where everyone takes a seat. There are people who have Mars natally retrograde, and that's something too. Check to see if you have Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, any of these planets retrograde natally, and see how those years vary for you and how those times vary from when the planets are direct. Get a formal relationship, follow this stuff, maybe one year, just play around with this. But I feel like with this Mars stationing retrograde, this would be a time, considering Mars is going to be retrograde until, when's Mars go direct? Until February. But we'll be chilling out in Cancer in the sign of its fall till, I think, about April or something like that. It's going to be a long time that Mars is going to be in Cancer. So I would say in that time, I would be mindful about, one, again, those kind of like sporadic inspirations, just going around being inspired but not really sticking to anything, but being just caught up in the feeling of inspiration but not wanting to make something tangible from that. And just be where, I don't want to say it's wasting time, but I think that what can happen sometimes in Cancer, when I feel like with Mars in Cancer, is that it can be it can maybe become complacent and comfortable in just the dream and the idea and the feeling, that safe space of the dream where everything is possible and everything seems so grand. But then when you go to execute, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is taking a lot of work. This is way more than I bargained for. I wanted to build this empire. What do you mean I need bricks? That's what I feel this Mars retrograde is going to need. Stamina is going to be the name of the game, and how you are recharging your energies. But I think that there just doesn't need to be an influx in a reflective type of thing. I think there needs to be a balance. Make sure to think about, what is it that you want? What is it that you're feeling? And then put some more time into that. Carve out moments so that you can just make the journey more pleasurable. Just make it more, and not in being a way where you feel like you have this pressure of a striving towards to be someone else, but just more so, what does better look like for you at this time, is what I think that Mars, and really always, but what does that better look like for you, and striving towards those goals right now. Let the inspiration take you on an adventure, in a sense, with that kind of Mars stationing retrograde, and just reevaluating just where you've been taking your steps and things. Now, interesting, a little bit later, at about 5:53 p.m., that Mercury retrograde is going to be forming a square with Saturn. And this is going to be happening at 13 degrees and 5 minutes. Mercury's in Sag, and Saturn is in Pisces. Now, both of these signs, Sag and Pisces, are ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter, Pisces is ruled by Jupiter traditionally. And more than just that energy of expansion, Jupiter is about learning. You don't, in that, and you don't get that expansion, you don't get that wisdom if you don't do anything. Pisces gets a feeling, they get this stuff that moves them, these dreams, these cosmic downloads, and you just want to do something with that. They just let the energy flow. And it's similar with Sag. There's this inner fire that there's this excitement for what can I see today? What can I experience today? And not in just like what the world has to give me as far as like what I can give back to the world. In the square energies are when the planets are 90 degrees apart. There is this tension that can happen with squares. I like to think of them as Martian in nature, that Mars kind of influence. There's something that needs to take place. And I think that this, with that Saturn and Pisces, I think that it's more than just having the feeling. As far as like if you find yourself saying something a lot like, oh, I wish I had a bunch of money. What are you doing to get yourself a bunch of money? Like they'll say, I hear people sometimes will say like, oh, I need to go play the lottery. This is a lucky day. Let me go play the lottery. Go play the lottery. If something is telling you to go, and trust your nudge. I'm not telling you to gamble away all your money, but maybe you go buy yourself a lottery ticket and you win yourself $5. You're more abundant than you were a minute ago. So taking those wins, but what I'm getting with this square is just to not to let, I feel like with that Sag and Pisces, the tension is you get that fire and it's like how to not let that get extinguished by how it takes form with that Saturn energy. The Mercury is the thought and the Saturn is you actually building the thing. So that Mercury energy is, I think it's coming at your ideas, keeping them grand, but what are the little small steps, the sort of mundane kind of steps that maybe aren't so fun at first, but they're going to lead to this greatness. I think about when I would practice like saxophone, for example. There'd be hours that I'd have to put into for this one, maybe 30-minute hour moment that I would have during a performance. But there's something about that process, like when you start getting better and you start improving where something would trip you up and then you just start flowing through it. It's just like, oh, a while ago that was like really troublesome, and now like you see this growth. And I think that's the beauty, that's one of the beautiful things that Saturn brings, is that it took some work, maybe it was a little difficult, but that feeling of satisfaction knowing that when that thing is done, man, I really brought that. And I think this square is taking that reevaluation from this Mercury and this Mars being retrograde, even Jupiter being retrograde. How have you been growing? And now putting this into better action and letting that be the focus, which is going to be nice because then you're thinking about all the things you're wanting to attract. And that's getting into Venus's realm. And she is going to be entering into Aquarius at about 10:13 p.m. And so Venus in Aquarius, one of Saturn's signs traditionally, Aquarius is the fixed air sign. And when you think about that, with Saturn being able to give form and Aquarius being able to, they hold the thought, that fixed energy has that stamina that I was talking about that is going to be needed, I think, with this Mars stationing retrograde. Venus is thinking about all the ways that she's going to feel when she achieves this goal, when she gets this vision in her head and really just comes to, and Venus does great in an air sign. One of the signs she rules is Libra. So this Venus, I think, here can, I think, and I talk about vision boards, but I think vision boards in specifically with like when Venus is in air signs, I think can be very motivational and very helpful because they help you keep the dream focused. If you just put maybe something, maybe it's just a picture you want, let's say you want to open a market. Put a picture of a market or something like that. Something that you pass every day that like keeps igniting that thing, like that keeps that mental focus. When I'm getting up, what am I doing to attract more of this dream? How am I pulling more of this? And not even really pulling, because now Venus is more active in this Aquarius energy. So what conversations am I having? What alliances am I forming? What collaborations are happening in order for me to get this thing going? And this may not be like a verbal transaction. Maybe the collaboration is just you looking up someone to maybe do something with the future, but you're just like introducing yourself to new materials of whatever. But I think too, Venus in Aquarius can see where you've been attracting disharmony in your life. Maybe where it's been maybe a certain mindset with that Aquarius. Aquarius has a strong mental energy. And maybe your mind has been focused on one sort of thing, has been maybe hyper focused. I would even say cravings. I would even pay attention to when Venus is in a fixed sign. And I would think with this, yeah, just kind of evaluate that and see how you can, yeah, again, maybe do something to change that narrative a little bit. And I think that's where I kind of like this sort of mutable energy that's floating around here between the Sagittarius, the Pisces, the Gemini, which we're going to be talking about next with Jupiter. But I like that. I think that can help Venus move this energy along. And I think that's going to be nice too, because Venus will eventually form an opposition with Mars while he's in Leo. So you can get this kind of bird's eye view of like as far as like what's going on and where you want to move forward. But let's talk about this next energy, because I think these last two kind of tie this story up. So even though it seems like there's a lot that's going on, you can streamline this into something very smooth. Pick a focus and just kind of run with it. You know, like what is applicable with all of this stuff. And even if you're not sure, you know, you say you hear all this energy, or you hear all these people talk about all these energies, these transits. Look at the houses, you know, just look at the houses, look at the basic meanings that they have for, and just what did they inspire in you? What do you think of when you think of the house of the home? When you think of the house of communications, friendships, childhood, when you think of the house of the self, and you know, it builds together really nicely. Now on Saturn Day, the 7th of December, at about 12:57 p.m., the sun is going to be forming an opposition with Big Papa. And this is going to be happening at 16 degrees and 15 minutes. The sun's in Sag and Jupiter is in Gemini. Now, and he's retrograde. Now, with the sun and Jupiter in opposition, I think that this can be that enlightened moment, that sort of like, aha, sort of like, okay, this is what I need to do to get to that growth. Like I've taken all of the things that have been going on with me, maybe the things that are around me. And that's what I wanted to mention too. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. That Venus in Aquarius, pay attention to the conversations that are going on around you as well. I'm working with someone who has some Aquarius as a tricky Aquarius placement. Yeah, Mars there. But it's sometimes that fixed air energy with that fix that can get you in a little trouble. And I say sometimes you can get caught up in other people's things too, because again that air can be really strong. You know, once it really starts picking up steam. So that's just another thing with that Venus. But that might what happened with this opposition is that you see what's holding you up. You know, the oppositions I'd like to think of as kind of Saturnian in nature. And so you're seeing a limit, you're seeing a boundary, you've seen where the wall is, the plateau, and how you can ascend through that, kind of break that next barrier open to get over that next hurdle in whatever area or whatever thing that you're dealing with in your life right now. I think that Sun is brings that hope. The Gemini is just getting the mind active again. And that's something I think with the Sun and Jupiter too. Do some things that help. Almost I I almost get like this visual of like it's like if you've been feeling like the brain has been really sluggish, doing some things to just like get you thinking, to just get you thinking again. I love, and I have my moon in Gemini, and I love new things. I do, and not just like random things that have. I've been listening to this podcast that talks about tarot, and it's opened up my world in a whole new way. It's at such depth. It's a little treat, and that's what I give yourselves, little treats. Yourself something to grow, so that it's like this to me just gives you a chance to really show yourself, I think, some deep compassion too. If you've been feeling stuck, if you've been hitting a wall, if you've been looking for a solution, and you just happen to go out one day and then it just sort of comes to you. It's just like, man, why not like, man, why didn't I think of it sooner? It's just like, oh, this is what happens when I step away from the problem. When I go focus on something else, then some solutions start coming up for this other thing in this area of my life. And then you can even start seeing, you can have some fun. You can see where that even comes up in your chart sometimes, because there's some times I notice where my sun rules a lot of my Leo placements, which there are 5 of them. And so when my sun is feeling some type of way, then all my first house stuff is definitely feeling some type of way. But I'm aware of that, and you get better at it each time. So it's better. It makes it so that it doesn't run you when you have eyes on it, as opposed to like, instead of like, why is this happening to me? It's just like, oh, there's this transit going on, or there's this going on. So yeah, just something about just letting the insights inspire, the insights like, and encourage too. So last little transit here, and I'll get you out of here, get you out there conquering. On Moon Day, the 9th of December, this is going to be happening pretty late, at about 11:30 p.m., Venus, the lovely Empress, is going to be forming a sextile with the North Node at 3 degrees and 31 minutes. Venus in Aquarius, the North Node in Aries. And now when we talk about the North Node, of course, we have to talk about the South Node, because when there's always a conversation that's going on when there's something going on with those two. So when there's a sextile happening there in Aries with the Venus in Aquarius, there's a trine that's happening with the South Node in Libra. And I want to go talk about the trine first, because the trine is, for me, is Jupiterian in nature. There's movement, there's expansion. It's the most beneficial aspect. And that's interesting when you think about it in connection with the South Node, because I think I like to think of it as where the North Node is kind of where you're going, the uncharted territory. The South Node is like where you've been. And there's a lot of wisdom in the South Node. They both are useful. And I think that the South Node is an area that you call on for. It is a time for reflection, and just to kind of, it's a place where you can just kind of get your footing. And so I think that there can be, during this whole kind of this week, can be one where you've just are analyzing the past in a way that's constructive. You can analyze a situation, go back to whatever needs to be reviewed with all of these retrogrades, and take some actions towards the stuff. That sextile energy, which is Venusian I'd say for me in nature, starts to get you excited about the new turns that are happening. Oh, I'm starting to do this thing again. So now this is starting to shift. Do this thing again. Okay, now this is starting to shift. Okay, now we're starting to get on a roll again. I've been juggling some things here as of late. And I will say where it dipped, but in a way that I just let it dip. I literally just kind of let it dip. But I noticed where there were things that were staying. where there were things that were implemented that kept the energy. You build up in the highs so that when the lows come, you got some tools to deal with them. And that's just something I've learned, just having, sun in the 12th house, south node in the 12th house. So, I think about these things all like often. And I think that this Venus here is attracting an opportunity here to attract just a different perspective, a different way of going, a new range of motion, in a way that can be encouraging in a practical way, not in a, I'm not going to say it's like all of your things are just going to vanish, but all your things can become manageable. They can become where it's just like, there's nothing that I can do about that. So I'm going to do just that, nothing. And then I'm going to put my energy elsewhere and put it in something that needs your attention. It's just like, well, if I can't do this, then I got to do this. I got to tackle this thing. This has been bugging me for whatever. Let's just get it done. Let's just get it done so I can get a win. And then it's like, okay, I'm feeling like a winner. Let me go back to this other thing that I had to set back here. Like that's how I feel this flow is going. Look, yeah, I knew I had a lot to talk about with this. At first, I thought watching was gonna be like 10 minutes, but that's just a quick rundown of how to work with these energies for this week. But again, a real key thing. And if this is something if this does seem like a lot, and you're just like, Justin, I can't make heads, tails, or sandwiches of this, then down in the description box below, we can make a sandwich and talk about these transits. We can talk about the sun and Mercury and Saturn, Jupiter, all the stuff. I like to work with the personal planets, the classical planets, traditional planets, but we can get into the outer planets too. I got a deep relationship with Neptune. She's opposed my sun almost by the minute, or no, not almost by the second, but. So we can talk about all those things. And if you're wanting to work with those more personally, again, down in the description box below, I offer those services. So if that's something that resonates with you, check it out. And also, if you want to work with if this is going over your head and you're just like want something a bit more simpler, on my other channel, the Chariot and Friends, I just talk about the lunar shenanigans. And we talk about the moon going in different signs and different phases, the times where she goes void, of course, and then I do some tarot card readings after that, or just like one, just one reading per sign. Let's calm down, but. Yes, all that stuff is down there for you. And that's all I got for you. So until next time, keep raising that consciousness, that vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Wait, oh yeah, Mercury Day. I don't know what I'm looking at.